So our first speaker today, I had the privilege of listening to this talk at EARL, and it literally was one of the highlights of the day, because it definitely wasn't my talk, that's for sure. But David Goody gave a fantastic talk and a fantastic pitch, if you like, of Shiny, and I wanted to hear it so much again. I wanted all of you guys to hear it. I thought I'd invite him to give that talk here. So I shall stop sharing my screen. David, I'll invite you to come off mute, share your screen, and pitch it all to us again.
Right, hopefully I'm off mute and hopefully I'm sharing my screen here. Is that working for you, Jeremy? Brilliant. Now we'll see if the slides actually move forward. Right, my name's David Goody. I work for the Education and Skills Funding Agency. So the first question is, what the heck is the Education and Skills Funding Agency? We're part of the Department for Education, and actually we're accountable for spending £57 billion worth of funding every year. So that's way more than kind of gets spent on defence. That's kind of 20 times what gets spent on unemployment benefit and things like that. And that money goes across a wide range of different things. Basically, it's funding schools, it's funding apprenticeships, it's funding FE colleges. And within all that money going out, there is a huge amount of work that the Education and Skills Funding Agency needs to do to make sure we get value for money, make sure funds are being properly spent, and also working out what we do when on the occasions when sort of training providers and others kind of run into issues in terms of funding and finance. Obviously, in terms of the crazy year we've been in, there's a whole bunch of additional stuff we've been doing this year, trying to support the sector as best we can through dealing with COVID in schools and things like that. But the key thing is around this is a huge amount of taxpayers' money that's going out around this. And there are large numbers of operational decisions that need to be made about how that money is given out, making sure it's being given out in the right places, to the right courses and things like that. And also then being able to kind of work with the sector and with providers to make sure it's being used in a governed way, because the National Audit Office, Education Select Committees and others will all love to be able to kind of pick up on anything whereby taxpayers' money is being wasted or things like that. And what I'm going to do in this talk is kind of go through how we've used an example of a few of the Our Shiny apps that we've put together to really drive this sense of how we ensure that 57 billion is being kind of spent accurately, and also what makes a good Our Shiny app that really helps to deliver on that. The nerdy geeky bit to start with, we publish our Shiny apps via RS Connect, so we're very much within the RStudio environment in terms of building stuff up around there. It's an internal only one, so it's very much designed for people that we have working within the Department for Education. But within that, we've got sort of 1,250 licenses that we've got for secured apps and wider people using apps that are unsecured. The other thing is we use Azure DevOps in terms of our general code management and our deployment pipelines. It's interesting, I know from some conversations we've had with RStudio, they're beefing up some of the offer that they've got in terms of the sort of the deployment pipelines they've got. But we found, because as generally within government, we're quite heavily invested into kind of Microsoft builds and setup, that actually the Azure DevOps and the way we've managed to set things up around that works very well. Got separate staging servers and production servers as well. So this all works as a really good sort of robust pipeline, and something that as you add more apps into this environment, we can control access to those. We can be kind of deploying test versions of the apps, QAing and testing them, and then going and really making sure that what we deploy into production is stable and well managed. I'm now going to take a little bit of a tangent, and I'm going to take a bit of a step back in time. This isn't just that 2020's been so bad I'm harking back to my youth. There is a point to this bit that's coming up. I'm going to talk about old school MP3 players, basically, to underpin a key point of what I want to get across with the conversation. So first up with this is a Rio Diamond PMP 300 MP3 player. For those of you with longer memories, this is something that was coming out in kind of the mid 1990s, and this was cutting edge. This had 16 megabytes of storage space for your MP3s and your listening pleasures. It had removable storage, it had removable batteries, and you can kind of see around this that we've got a circular bit in the middle, which may remind you of other MP3 players I might be talking about in a minute's time. And when this came out, it's kind of fairly well received, but it is now well buried in the sort of the junkyard of history around here. And when we look back on this now, it looks a bit klutzy in terms of, 3 absolutely identical buttons on the bottom, including an intro button. I'm not quite sure what you would ever use an intro button for, and various other bits around there. We then move forward a little bit and we get to the Archos Jukebox 6000. We're now up to 6 gigabytes of storage space within here, and a partnering software solution that was so bad that there was a third-party software that was developed for it, which actually outlasted the technology itself by at least 15 years. Again, tiny little buttons fiddly around the place in terms of what's going on, weird kind of bulbous sides to it and things like that. But again, it had storage space. It worked across a range of different computers. It had replaceable batteries in it. It was something that was kind of priced pretty well in terms of where it was at and things like that. But again, we look back at that now, it looks kind of clunky in hindsight with where we are. I now move on to where you're expecting me to go, which is then, of course, the Apple iPod, which history generally remembers as your breakthrough MP3 player. My argument would be that functionally, this is actually a pretty rubbish product. It doesn't have a replaceable battery. It doesn't have replaceable or expandable memory. It didn't work on PCs. It was very expensive. It didn't have a wide range of the other buttons that the other ones had to allow you to immediately do things. You had to go up and down and through menus and things like that to do it. If I was sitting in a planning meeting and we were writing out a functional spec for what we wanted, and we put kind of a few of the things I've shown up here, the iPod probably wouldn't win because it doesn't tick as many boxes. But what it did is it thought about user experience. It thought about what it actually wanted to do to deliver something that people can work through and actually really kind of customize and nail in and say, these bits are really important for people actually using this on a day-to-day basis. And for this seeming something that is effective, and this is seeming something that actually works very closely in terms of what you want to do. So getting the user experience exactly right, rather than just ticking off a range of functionality, is why this changed the world. This then, without the iPod, do you get the iPhone? Do you then get modern smartphones as we know it, etc., etc.? That's why this changed. And that is the point that I always come back to with working with our Shiny apps compared with working, say, with Power BI, which we use a lot as well, and is a very good platform and things like that, is people often want to say, list out the functional things that Power BI can do, list out the functional things that I can do with an R Shiny app. Where's the benefit of R Shiny? And the key point is R Shiny is for developing apps that you can customize to do exactly what you want them to do. It's not a drag and drop, it's not a pull-in kind of thing. It has that huge level of customization there. So let me run you through some examples now and start bring us back up to date rather than old school MP3 players. This is an example of an application that we use a chunk. There's a lot of mapping stuff we do, which is very useful when we're looking at engaging with providers on a number of different areas. In terms of thinking about some of the things that have happened with COVID stuff that's been going on, we know that's something that's hit different areas of the country differentially. There's also a lot of stuff in terms of looking at inequalities across the country or just understanding local areas. This itself is something that we've put together, and basically what this application allows you to do is to be able to take any kind of data set you want and then just be able to kind of load this up quickly and map out what's happening around here. This is actually looking at basically education providers by their current Ofsted grades around the country. And what we've been able to do with this is basically kind of move in and leverage in with what happens with the leaflet JavaScript package and with a lot of data sources that we already hold in SQL backends, and link those all together to get a very clear, clean and functional self-service app. This helps us in a number of reasons. Firstly, because when people were doing mapping stuff before, either they were speaking to the small number of people who had ArcGIS licenses, which is not a particularly efficient way of doing things, or what was happening was that people were then going and trying to do their own ad hoc solutions via things on Google Maps and Bing and things like that, which is again far from ideal in terms of what we want. And one of the things I like in terms of the development environment around this is that there's a lot of stuff we've done with Leaflet before and other things, but if you're working directly with Leaflet, you'd need to know HTML, you need to know JavaScript, you need to know CSS and things like that. Whereas if you want to do something out of the box with an R Shiny app, actually you're coding in R all the time. You download the Leaflet package, you put the stuff together, and you don't need to know 5 languages at once. Yep, knowing some HTML and CSS and things like that will help, but it keeps you in one single coding environment, which helps in a lot of different areas. So again, in terms of what we've got with app design around this, in terms of different bits, if I want to add schools onto this, and there was a button on the right-hand side that was about add a group of schools, click on that. I get a menu option that comes up. Everything else behind this is grayed out. We can then go and have total control around what we're doing with this. We've got some clear headers in terms of what types of schools we might want to add onto this map. All the data behind this is being held in an SQL table and is being kind of updated on a live basis daily. We can work with drop downs. We can customize things in terms of where these dots are being added to the map. You know, do we want them color coded by Ofsted grade, phase, local authority, area? You can customize particular colors. You can do any kind of labeling you want within there. You can go and customize this to the nth degree. You can kind of make the markers bigger or smaller or things like that. Again, it's this customization that makes it useful for a wide range of audiences, and we can drop in and out what we need in this space. We can also set it up so basically you can just say, okay, you've got a CSV file that has got X number of schools in, and you don't want to go and put them into the map one by one. Fine, just point this towards the CSV file. As long as it has a column that has one of our unique reference numbers on this, or if it's got something with a postcode on, then just point that to this CSV at it. Doesn't matter if it's got 50, 60 other columns of random things, it'll find the right column and it will then go and map all those individual people onto the map there and set whatever marker and label options you want with that. So again, you've got a table of data, you want it mapping, you literally just upload it into here and in a step, it's done. And because we've already done the work in the background of knowing where individual schools and education providers are, you don't have to be messing around with latitude and longitude and anything like that. Here's an example of kind of zoomed into a particular area here. I'm based in Coventry, so these are our schools and basically their Ofsted grades in and around Coventry. At this point, again, thinking about the customization around this, we can do what we want in terms of setting up the backgrounds around this. So this one is very much set up with a background which is focusing on kind of roads and layouts here. You get a sense of where the centre of Coventry is, where it's being bounded by kind of the A46 down at the top and the M6 at the A46 at the bottom and the M6 at the top. We can also kind of go and split things up in this way. Here we've gone and actually put in place something with a very grayed out background, which allows us to do heat maps on top of this. Now, again, thinking about the customization with this, sorry about that. Again, thinking about the customization that's going on with a chunk of this here, we can set up the geographical boundaries we want to work with, whether they're local authorities, whether they're parliamentary wards, medium super output areas, lower super output areas, and things like that. Again, we can work out what we want to use within those, get them loaded up in SQL, and get the app going and leveraging them. In this example here, the dot in the middle is a school. The red areas are where the majority of their pupils come from. The yellow areas are slightly smaller proportion. The green areas even smaller, and the grey just a handful there. One of the things, again, that really adds operational value in terms of doing this is being able to have something very quickly where you might be talking with the school. They might have falling pupil numbers. You might be having conversations with them about whether it's still sustainable for that school to come over and whether there is sort of additional bridging funding that needs to be given to them. They might say, hey, you know what? There's a new housing estate that's opening up a little bit south of where we are. We're expecting to get lots of pupils in from there. And actually, we can then quickly go and look at this and kind of say, well, actually, you don't actually attract very many pupils from that area anyway. They typically go to other schools. Therefore, how much is that new housing estate going to have an impact in terms of that? And it helps us understand a lot of what's happening in terms of the geography of a basic area. So where people are having conversations with schools, where we're looking at the impact in different areas. For example, there might be times when FE colleges are looking to merge or things like that, and we are wondering what is going to happen in terms of the availability of provision across a wide space. What we can use this for is allowing people to very quickly understand what's happening at a local level. We also did some work linking into an API by a company called Targamo, which do quite a lot of work looking at travel distances and things like that. So going again to Coventry, blue spot in the center here is a central location. What we've got with the color coding around here is how long it takes via public transport to get to that location. So the bit in the center there is within 15 minutes, the bit outside of this 15 to 30 minutes, then 30 to 45 minutes, and then the yellow area furthest out 45 to 60 minutes. Again, what's interesting here is we know a lot of people when traveling to education will be taking public transport around this. The fact that we've got kind of particular central locations like Leamington, Kenilworth, some places around kind of Birmingham International Station and Stetchford and things like that, because you're close to a train line, you can then actually kind of get in towards the centre of Coventry and get to that school relatively quickly. Whereas where other places around here, Solihull and the like, it's actually much harder because the direct transport routes aren't there. Again, thinking about what I was talking before about where you might have providers merging, where we might be thinking about availability of provision, being able to understand these transport routes very quickly. And on this, the black lines are the train lines, the red lines here are bus routes. Again, it gives people a very clear understanding of what's actually happening in a local area and where different areas are being served by. And that's really quite powerful around this. And again, this is an always on tap kind of thing. You go in, you select the provider you want, and it immediately gives you this as a self-service area. And you've got all the different variants of this that we can kind of move between. So it's a very powerful way of making sure people have the knowledge available to them without having to kind of go and commission another team to be doing a bespoke bit of work or anything around there. The other thing around doing this, you've done a lot of work, you've created your map and things like that. Actually, you then want to kind of share it elsewhere. And obviously, you can kind of go and take screen grabs and things like that. But we also use the functionality within our Study apps to be able to kind of pin a set or bookmark a set of particular parameters around this. So at the point that you've gone and then kind of set up, these are the people that I want to map on here. This is how I want to lay out my markers and things like that. You click a bookmarking button on this, and what it does is it writes a small file back to the SQL server and holds it there. And what that means is you can then give someone a unique link, as per the one here. And when they click on that unique link, they will see the map that you have designed. And then they can use the full functionality, zooming in and out, varying the background layers and things like that. They can even then continue to edit that app, i.e. taking individual schools off, putting additional schools on and things like that, and then bookmark that again. It becomes a live map that people can work with in terms of what's going on here. And that again is really quite powerful in terms of the fact that when circumstances change, you can come back and tweak what you've already got, and you're not sending around big and bulky files. You just give people a web link and there is the exact map that you were working off. A few other things in terms of, as I say, talking about kind of like sort of the customization and approach around this. We've ended up in a roughly default style for a lot of stuff we're doing with a lot of applications. So got a navigation bar down the right-hand side on this, the main part of the app that drops in the center, and then maybe kind of some messaging around the top. A few little bits and bobs that are going on here. You can see we've got some kind of big, bold, chunky buttons over the left-hand side here. So people being able to click a button and leave direct feedback. On some of the apps where you do that, it will actually note which part of the app you're in at the point you look at feedback, which provider you're looking at and things like that, which for a kind of a general QA and development point of view for us is really quite important. But also it just makes that whole element of no one ever looks at the guidance. Well, at least you're making it quite clear and chunky where that guidance is, where a webinar that we've set up around this is. And it means that when you open up a new app, it feels familiar because we're doing it in this same kind of shape and layout. Also, little bits sometimes make a big difference. Here we've got kind of expandable menu items here to try and avoid the sense of you open it up and your classic Excel spreadsheet with 30 tabs in it and you're scrolling backwards and forwards and wondering what's happening. You go into this and say, actually within this, there's a schools view, there is actually an academy trust level view, there's a local authority level view, these bits with your circles here. And that's quite heavy and punchy. When you kind of go and click on one of those, you can then delve down into more detail, and that the welcome info bit at the top with our little info icon here, and the exception report again with an info icon here. These are all helping to just guide your eye and lead you through the different elements of this report, just to make that navigational experience easier. And of course, within the R Shiny apps, you've got a lot of opportunities with kind of reactive elements and different ways of being able to kind of click through to ways. One of the things that drives me nuts with Power BIs is so many of the drill throughs. You kind of click and you get a basically a menu item that comes up where you need to scroll to drill through to and things like that. I don't want all those options. If I know the action I principally want people to do, like the way the iPod had fewer buttons than the other ones, I want to select the exact action that's going to occur in that place and drive people through there. And again, that's that level of customization that you can get in terms of the different elements around here. A few other things just to summarize at the end here. I like the way that R Shiny works with R Shiny apps work with shared sessions. So once a first person has fired up the app, then actually the second person loading it hops onto that same session. So you don't have a loading time when it's pulling the information into there. Some of our apps, the initial the first load of the day might take around sort of 30 seconds, 40 seconds or something like that, just because of the sheer weight of data we're pulling in. But then when person 2 comes in, it's like that. And again, that makes a big difference. People knowing you click on it and it will come up. Customizable URLs. We've all probably seen something, whether it's a SharePoint link or something like that, your URL is 3 lines long. With this, it's rsconnect/ and then whatever you want in terms of your app here or something like that. That again just makes it easier and cleaner in people understanding what you're doing. We've got some detailed apps that monitor usage that are going on. We also use a lot of our markdown reports in the server as well, which means that you've got live things being updating rather than someone using an attachment that's now 4 days old and being updated and something like that. So again, it helps us in terms of speed. It helps us in terms of it looking and feeling sort of slick and professional in terms of what we're doing, and just kind of clean and nice to use. And as I say, that's what I'd loop back to at sort of the end point of this, is what I've found with a lot of the app design we've done, and I've really only scratched the surface with what we've done here, is people are busy. People don't spend their time wanting to wade through your analytical app or your Power BI or your BI report or something like that. They've got a job to do. They need to find their insight, or they need to find the bit of information they need, go in, get it, get out and work their way through. And the faster and the easier you make it for them to do that, the more value they get out of your app, and therefore the better decisions they make. And that for me is actually the really key thing in terms of everything that's got got things going on in terms of what we've done around this. Okay, let's start. I see there's quite a few questions here that have already been pinged up, so I've got the chat bit up here, and I will try and work through this. Yeah, I would generally say I am a massive fan of Leaflet. I think it's an absolute game changer as a package, and it's really, really nice and really, really lightweight stuff as well. In terms of some of the stuff, so someone was talking about kind of some of the backdrops and things like that. So again, this is one of the things where I think it really pays dividends to delve into stuff. So a lot of stuff with Leaflet, you'll go and start using it, and you'll probably use some of the sort of OpenStreetMap backdrops out of the box and things like that. But actually spending some time looking at the other providers that are available, whether it's Mapbox, whether it's Thunder Forest or people like that, they do actually come up with some really useful ones. The public transport one I showed with the train lines and the bus routes and things like that, that's a Thunder Forest one. And actually it's the kind of thing there, we're just spending a little bit of extra time to kind of go, actually what makes this map as easy to read as possible? What's the thing that really kind of gets across with where we are? That again makes this big difference to how much kind of value people add into different elements like that. In terms of the stuff we've done around AD groups and things like that, there are various ways you can manage those within RS Connect. There, obviously, you can do stuff where you're just kind of assigning to individual license groups on that. But I think the main thing is that the stuff that we were doing with the stuff we were doing with AD groups was just making sure that we can manage stuff in terms of really tracking who's accessing different apps, and again that helps us to manage our license numbers. In terms of, is there a free stuff for this around? Basically, I think there are various packages via kind of Shiny Apps IO and things like that, where you would be able to do sort of equivalent stuff around there. And most of the baseline stuff we're using in terms of RStudio and the packages around those are open source as well. In terms of Oscar, I think you're kind of saying with the isochrone stuff, you're meaning the travel time stuff that's doing that. That's actually partly calculated through the Targamo, and I'll just kind of put the name of that in the chat here, the Targamo API. So that's actually leveraged from the stuff that they do. So that integrates kind of very nicely there. That's not something where R's doing all the calculation itself. It comes from the API that's there. Cool. Any further questions from folks?
First of all, thank you so much, David. That was a fantastic talk. I'm sure a lot of people will agree as well. Lots of virtual clapping, even though you can't hear it. We've had one question in the Slack group, which I've given an answer to, but I'm sure you have an opinion on as well. Yeah. Does creating our Shiny apps require any web development experience? So things like HTML and CSS and JavaScript?
I would say, I would basically say no as a start point, but it's the kind of thing you can grow into. And I'll tell you why I think this is really quite important. There was a lot of mapping stuff we did earlier on before we got this setup done, where we were kind of coding HTML stuff directly and using kind of a number of workarounds to work out how we manage that. And part of the issue with that is you get the classic thing where you get a full stop in the wrong place or something like that, and basically you just end up with a blank screen. And then you're debugging in various ways to work out why you just have a blank screen. Whereas actually where you're developing an R-Shiny app or something like that, you will get a more intelligent level of error message and a more guided one where you have things that are going wrong. So I think the main thing around this is that the R-Shiny apps give you a very good start environment to be able to generate stuff that if you've got a general knowledge of how R is working, you're working in the same basis, you're working in the same nature of the language. As you go forward, there might be certain elements in terms of the customizations that I'm talking about, where you do want to dip into CSS, where you do want to dip into JavaScript, where you do want to dip into HTML, but you're doing that for value added bits, for your cherries and your icing on the cake, rather than the main bit you're doing. So it becomes a much better environment to step into. One of the difficulties, again, as I said, with the leaflet stuff in particular, is literally to do something of that coding directly. You do need to do HTML, JavaScript, and CSS, which are three fundamentally different languages, to get it to work. And it's like kind of writing in three English, French, and German to write up your to write a report or something like that. So I think doing stuff within R-Shiny is a much more holistic and simplified way of doing something like this.
Yeah, you should have seen my last Shiny app. I think I had all of them in it at some point. So it was looking absolutely, well, the back end of it looked horrendous. The front end of it looked beautiful because I had all those languages there. Yeah. David, I know that you've got to get away, and we really appreciate you coming to talk to us today. Thank you so much for joining and for giving that talk again, just as good as it was at EARL. And thank you for taking all of our questions as well.
Thank you all very much.